former Statistician General, Dr. Pali Lehohla, is with us this morning. But let's tell you why he's talking to us. Now, he said that South Africa's administered prices have not effectively served the purpose of protecting prices in the consumer basket to cushion the poor. Lehohla says this has created a lot of barriers for the poor masses of the country, and the society is forced into dysfunction. He goes on to say that the production of energy by Eskom, for example, should have been approached as a developmental investment instead of the user pay system that was adopted. Even with public facilities such as general hospitals that are free to the public, if the value chain of their functioning is not effectively managed to the end, they fail to serve the public. Well, there he is, our former Statistician General, Dr. Pali Lehohla, joins us. Good to have you, Doc. Thanks so much for joining us.
No, thank you very much for the invitation.
Always a pleasure. So, I've given a little bit of the background, but perhaps you can give us the main thrust of your discussion as you talk about administered prices and what they actually are meant to achieve.
Administered prices are prices that are set by state institutions. They are regulatory in form, but they serve a developmental purpose. They were largely done in the Soviet Union. They also were in South Africa with the marketing boards. And of course, they remained in things like electricity, in some of the food supplies, such as maize meal. Some of these are controlled prices so that development is achieved, the poor are protected, and so on. So that is what they serve. In the case of Eskom, I mean, Dr. Van Bail, when he established Eskom in 1923 at the invitation of Transmart, this was an investment of 16 million that was government managed. And then, of course, Bail said two things around this, which was a country that should industrialize depends on coal and, or not coal, but energy and steel. And those prices of those items had to be regulated in a way such that they are affordable and sustainable. But when you open up such industries to market forces in the way we did, we saw the steel going, ISCO dying, and now we are seeing Eskom in dire straits as the administered prices by municipalities and everybody are well above inflation. And it was in the report of South African Reserve Bank to Parliament that of all the prices that rose, there was a rise in the price of water and electricity, well above inflation, when actually administered prices have to be well below inflation.
Yeah. All right. So your view is that the NDP suggested what needs to be done and why it has to be done, but did not say how to actually do it. I mean, how do we reconcile its function and that of the government to efficiently target and achieve development?
Well, I mean, we argue that the policies of the governing party are robust, are good. Of course, I mean, when you say there shouldn't be poverty, it's a good policy. It's a good policy statement. And all those things are important, that there shouldn't be apartheid. People shouldn't be discriminated against, and people died for these ideals to fight and get these ideals right. When it gets wrong is when the tools of achieving these goals are not explicit and are not robust. And I think that's what we have suffered, particularly in the latter part of the fifth and the sixth administration. I think we really lost it there, because the how of these things have not been road tested. There are no plans on the ground to say that these things should be done this way. They are more exhortations around what is intended. I mean, if you think about the more recent investment summit, it was full of exhortations. It didn't achieve much, so to say, because there's no plan on the ground. Nelson Mandela advises us in his letter to Adelaide Tambo in 1967 that you must plan in the detail so that when fate tries its luck on you, it must be on your own terms. But now we have had many instances of fate, like the burning of Parliament, the floods, Ebola, or COVID-19, And when all these things come, or the insurrection, when these matters, which are not necessarily fate, but that are disruptive, they actually do so on their own terms because there's no fundamental plan on the ground.
It's a great worry. It really is. I mean, the things that you're saying, it just it does invoke a lot of worry in South Africans. And I mean, let's look at the ANC. I mean, while the ANC-led government says it is for the poor, the SACP, which is a member of the tripartite alliance, says government policies are neoliberal. I mean, what is the problem? Is its policies wrong, or are they wrongly placed, or are they good policies, but there's just no implementation? I suppose, you know, that I've answered my own question in terms of saying the implementation is not there, but where are we going wrong here?
I would argue that this is you know, many people talk about we don't implement. No, it's not. You can't implement what is not a plan. I mean, you will always get with the wrong thing when you implement something that is not a plan. So it's not implementation. The question is the design of the policies. I mean, yes, the policy says ensure that there is poverty is eliminated, ensure that there is the school, the doors of learning are open. Those are good policy statements. You can't talk against those. But how they interlock, following motions of social motions of change and the economic motions, laws of motion of economics, that design doesn't exist. It lacks in our system. At the very best, where it is, it follows Milton Friedman's free market fundamentalism. And so when you do that, those cannot be pro-poor because the trickle-down effect doesn't occur. So we know all this, but our design is free market fundamentalism advocated by Milton Friedman. And then, of course, you overlay that, which, of course, by design, it inspires corruption. And then it generates corruption. And when you see that corruption, what it has done to the country, what we are seeing is basically by design. Yeah.
What corruption has done and continues to do, because, you know, we sometimes speak about it as if it's a gone era, and yet it's not. I mean, every day in every avenue we look at, there is still corruption, whether we're talking in the private sector, in the public sector. It's, I think, as you say, it's by design. It's almost been designed for corruption.
Yes, the system is designed to be open to corruption, very, very much so, because it's free market. I mean, the regulatory environment prefers a free market system in the midst of poverty, and free markets don't actually resolve poverty. You've got to get a regulatory system that is by design developmental and interventionist. So we lack the developmental edge and the interventionist muscle. Above all, we lack the ethics and the ability to manage our desires. I mean, it's a terrible situation that we are in.
Yeah.
And with all the kinds of problems like COVID, like the floods, like the insurrection, that ethos of governance that the ruling party founded itself on has gone so corroded, and you find that there is so much intra-party violence and death. That tells you that it is no longer a party that seeks to achieve the major objective, when you find an infighting that actually inspires death and becoming very dangerous to be a councillor. Yeah. In the country, particularly a councillor of the ANC. So we are in really dire straits.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at our economy, and like you say, a free market economy is not necessarily working, and by design is one that, you know, unfortunately is making it easy for corruption. But if we move in the direction of being a solely capitalist kind of economy, I mean, is that something that we should look at, or is that also a dangerous?
Well, the free market economies are capitalist by design. So they are capitalists. And I'm not suggesting that you should go socialist, but there are social democracies like the Scandinavian countries, where the human development is at the center of everything that is done. And then, of course, they have a mixed economy, which South Africa tended to prefer, but has been overrun by no bar holds or capitalist economy, where everything is up for sale. The public service is up for sale.
Yeah.
It's underfunded. Once it's defunded, and that's what Noam Chomsky says. You defund it, you ensure that things don't work. People get angry, and then you sell it for scrap. This is what is happening in the country at the moment.
Yeah.
So is Eskom going to be sold for scrap? So it's a situation where the policies by design have not been tested for robustness. And there is no pragmatism in the design of policies. They are not informed by science.
Economists suggest that South Africa needs to go heavy into industrialization to create jobs and to eliminate poverty as well as reduce inequality. I mean, why is it difficult for South Africa to do it? Because the country is rich in natural resources and it can beneficiate. You know, why can't we start there?
Well, the problem is if these are in the hands of the private sector, and they list anywhere they wish to list, and you don't have a base system that looks at the fundamentals, such as Eskom and the ISCO, and you sell those, then you are less likely to create an economy that benefits the poor. So that's the problem, and it will benefit the capitalist class and those that associate with that. And I think this is the crisis that we face at the moment. It is possible. South Africa is very rich. What is important is that through regulation and the developmental orientation of the state and capacitating it to act on those things that it has decided on. I mean, at the moment, we become a lumpen country that destroys its rail system, and then allows trucks to run on roads and destroy the roads. And then there are potholes. So the whole dysfunction is by design. Nobody is taking care because nobody has the overarching observation and understanding of how the economy functions. At the very top, these things are not designed in the way that they should. So and there are no scenarios. I mean, we've abandoned dealing with scenarios, looking at what's the best scenario, quantifying those scenarios, and then walking the talk.
It's amazing how
we wake up in the morning and think about something. I mean, it's inconceivable that in a period of 28 years, we have substantial announcements of policy design, which means every 3 years, we have a substantial announcement of policy. And those are not a coincidence because they coincide with MTF. So our plans are based on budgets that are driven by what money we have, what budgets we have, rather than what desires we have to solve problems of poverty. So the 3-year cycle is not a coincidence in terms of the basket of plans, or so-called plans, which are not plans by any measure of imagination.
It's amazing how you say South Africa is a rich country, which it is, but when you look at the people of South Africa, majority are poor and go to bed hungry, and that it doesn't weigh up. I mean, when you say, let's look at China, they adopted new economic reforms, opening itself up to the world. They didn't leave things to the markets to set up the prices, but they actually managed them because they believe the government's responsibility is cushioning the poor by implementing administered prices. I mean, how could this be achieved, since the South African government believes that the state should not interfere in markets at all?
Well, that's just very stupid. Then Milton Friedman went to China and found Deng there. And Deng Xiaoping said, no, we can actually drive markets as a state. but there will be markets that are to the desires of the population, and particularly in eradicating poverty. And China now has successfully eradicated poverty because they tamed the markets. We are actually saying it must be the markets. The markets will be angry when we do this. We are a small economy. Apartheid was the same economy, burdened with sanctions, but succeeded in its industrial policy. So the argument that we are a small economy, open economy, doesn't hold. It is the nature of the policies and the determination of government to ensure that those policies work right.
Yeah.
And that is at the core of what we have to do. It's not about the idea that we are a small economy in an open system. And now that Russia is fighting with Ukraine, we realize what determination to do things actually delivers, even to small economies. So we cannot, that argument of a small economy doesn't hold.
Yeah. You also speak very quickly, I know we're into time, we've got about just a couple of seconds left, but you talk about China escaping the noose of the IMF. Is this one of our problems too?
It is.
Yeah.
We have our head on the IMF banner. And that is why we have now accepted the $8.5 billion for a just transition. Of course, there must be a just transition. But we cannot be used as a poster boy. And right now, as Ukraine and Russia faces a crisis, everybody is going to coal. And we have this acceptance of money, which means we should go away from coal, which one agrees to. But we cannot be a poster boy. We've got to be very pragmatic around these things. Research shows that coal emissions can be absorbed and transformed into something else. That's where we should focus our minds. I mean, South Africa produced coal, liquid from coal under Sasol. This was a unique technology, as many other technologies that are unique to South Africa. But when government doesn't play an interventionist and developmental role, but just regulatory, it allows its IP to be sold and be kicked around. And then we remain with a poster boy status to please the world.
Just very quickly as we wrap, we've finished now, but my last question is, I mean, you speak about we've just gone too deep into the path of poverty right now, and obviously something needs to happen. Is it too late for us? You talk about a deliberate program to eliminate poverty. Can we get out of this if we put our mind to it and there is programs that are put in place? I mean, what would that top program be to help this country get out of this poverty we're in?
Well, the first thing really, I mean, as Einstein says, that if there is a problem and our lives depend on that, he'll spend the first 55 minutes of an hour to understand, define, and design, and then the last 5 minutes in implementation. We have not spent that proportionality of time on design and plan. We have rushed into implementing what has not been designed properly. And that's what we have to do first. In fact, many argue that let's do a few things. It's not about doing a few things. It's about understanding the system in its entirety and how it knocks one onto the other. And then you are capable of, you are in the capacity. You have the capacity then to do a few things because you understand the system. But we want to do a few things when we totally don't understand the system. And each time we get into a worse outcome. So that's what we have to do. Because the resources is not a problem of resources, it's not a problem of money. It's a problem of how we allocate and identify the plans and say, how will this plan roll out? We don't have that capacity. We don't have the staying power to do things because the plans are no plans at all. That's why we had 10 in 28 years, a 12 for the nation every 2.5 years.
I wish I could speak to you for longer, but we've got to leave it there. Former Statistician General Dr. Pali Lehohla, and always a pleasure speaking to him, says South Africa has gone far too deep into poverty. Something desperate needs to be done. And of course, a deliberate program is what is needed to eliminate program and lots more planning. All right, let's get into it. Our news just after 7 o'clock. I'll bring you the top stories.